A person's disrespect for you says more about their inner world than your worth. But your response to that disrespect reveals how deeply you've cultivated your own. Let us pause here. You see, many people waste years trying to convince others to treat them better, speaking louder, explaining more, begging for decency as if it is something to be negotiated. But the truth is, this respect begins in silence, not in explanation. When you carry a calm certainty within yourself, when you are rooted in your values and aware of your emotional energy, disrespect becomes easier to spot and far easier to handle without losing your peace. Handling disrespect isn't about controlling others. It's about not allowing their lack of control to disturb your own. There is a teaching passed down through the generations, one that is simple yet often forgotten in the complexity of modern life. How others treat you is not always about who you are. It is often a reflection of who they are. And yet, how you respond to their treatment reveals the depth of your own self-respect. Many believe that respect is something to be given by others, something to be earned or requested. But true respect is not a transaction. It is a state of being. It is something that radiates from within and teaches others, silently and powerfully, how to interact with you. To begin to handle those who do not respect you, you must first understand what it means to live with self-respect, not in the prideful, inflated sense of ego, but in the quiet, disciplined knowing of your own worth. It is a posture of dignity, not arrogance. It is the inner clarity that says, I do not need to convince you to see my value. I already see it myself. In a small village nestled between mountains, there was once an elderly woman known for her peace and wisdom. She was not wealthy. She did not hold a formal position in society, but whenever conflict arose in the community, people naturally sought her counsel. One day, a young man came to her, full of frustration. They mock me, he said. They dismiss my ideas. They speak over me as if I'm invisible. Why don't they respect me? The woman listened patiently and then gestured for him to walk with her. She led him to a nearby stream. It was clear and calm. Tell me, she said, if you drop a stone in this water, what happens? The man replied, it ripples. It stirs. She nodded. Now imagine that this water is your inner world. If every word others say creates a ripple within you, how can you ever find stillness? He was quiet. She continued, you want others to see your worth. But first, you must learn to see it yourself, even in silence, even when others do not. This story reflects the truth of the first principle. Respect begins with presence. Your presence communicates far more than your words. When you are centered, when you move with stillness and clarity, people feel it. It is not the loudest voice that commands respect. It is the most rooted one. And that root must begin within you. You may notice that people who do not respect you are often reacting not to who you are now, but to how you have allowed yourself to be treated in the past. Perhaps, unknowingly, you trained them through your silence, through your tolerance, through your hope that being nice would lead to kindness in return. But being good does not mean allowing yourself to be walked over. And being kind does not mean erasing yourself in the name of keeping the peace. Your energy speaks long before your words do. When you walk into a room and your posture says, I belong here, people respond. When your eyes reflect steadiness and not fear, others notice. When your tone is calm but firm, others pause. These are not acts of showmanship. They are expressions of inner harmony. They are the natural result of someone who no longer seeks permission to exist fully. There was a woman I once taught who worked in a very high-pressure office environment. She was intelligent, capable, and deeply compassionate. But she was constantly overlooked, interrupted, and dismissed. During our conversations, she confessed that she often felt like a ghost in the room. I don't know what to do, she said. I speak, but no one listens. I'm tired of trying so hard. I asked her to stop trying. Not to give up, but to stop trying in the way she had been. Try something else, I said. Try simply knowing that you belong there, without needing anyone to validate it. She began to change, not by saying more, but by saying less. She sat taller. She spoke slower. She didn't apologize when she had an opinion. Within weeks, people began responding differently. Why? Because she had changed the conversation without even using words. Her energy no longer whispered, please accept me. It now stated, I accept myself. This is the beginning of mastery, when you teach others how to treat you by embodying the way you treat yourself. And yet, even when we begin this internal shift, we will face challenges. There will always be people who test your boundaries, who mock your calmness, who try to stir chaos in your stillness. This is where the second principle becomes essential. Stillness is power. React less. Respond more. These words sound simple, but they require the discipline of a warrior and the patience of a gardener. To react is to give away your power. It is to let someone else's chaos dictate your emotional climate. But to respond, to choose with awareness how you engage, is a high art. Let us reflect on the image of a bowl of clear water. When you throw a stone into it, it ripples. But if you do not disturb it, it reflects the sky. In life, many situations will throw stones at you. Harsh words, dismissive glances, betrayals. If you allow each of these to ripple through your being, you lose clarity. But when you have trained your inner world to remain calm, you reflect truth. You see clearly. And from that clarity, you act, not out of emotion, but out of wisdom. There is a parable about a samurai who visited a Zen master. The samurai was known for his strength and skill, but he was also easily provoked. "Teach me about heaven and hell," he demanded. The master looked at him and said, "You are nothing but a brute, a disgrace to your title. You couldn't possibly understand such things." The samurai's face turned red with anger. He reached for his sword, ready to strike. The master raised a hand and said, "That is hell." The samurai paused, his body trembling. Slowly, he sheathed his sword and bowed. "And that," the master said, "is heaven." In this brief exchange, the master taught what many never understand: the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is the fire that burns without thought. Response is the warmth that comes from awareness. You cannot master your life until you master your reactions. And you cannot master your reactions until you slow down enough to feel what is true beneath the surface of the moment. There was once a woman who came to a workshop I led. She had spent decades feeling disrespected by her husband. "He never listens," she said. "He interrupts. He dismisses my feelings. And every time, I shout back or shut down." I asked her, "What do you feel just before you react?" She said, "Tightness, heat, a need to defend myself." "And if you didn't react right away?" I asked. She paused. "I'd see how tired he is, how defensive he is too, and maybe I'd respond differently." This is the quiet miracle of self-awareness. It reveals not only your pain, but the pain of others. It doesn't excuse disrespect, but it helps you decide how to engage. Not every provocation needs a reply. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is the one you choose not to utter. This does not mean tolerating abuse or mistreatment, but it does mean choosing your battles with wisdom. You begin to see that not all disrespect is malicious. Some is ignorance, some is projection, some is the echo of someone else's wounds. When you respond, not react, you become a mirror of clarity, not a sponge for their dysfunction. One of my students, a young teacher, once told me how a student constantly mocked her in class. She felt hurt, embarrassed, disrespected. "Should I discipline him in front of everyone?" she asked. I said, "No, speak with him privately. Look him in the eye. Ask him with calm curiosity why he speaks that way." She did. The boy, caught off guard by her lack of anger, confessed that he acted out because he thought she didn't like him. The real issue wasn't disrespect. It was a desperate need for connection. By not reacting, she uncovered truth. By responding, she healed the relationship. These are not rare examples. These are moments available to each of us every day. In our homes, in our workplaces, in our hearts. The world does not need more noise. It needs more clarity. And clarity arises when we choose stillness over reaction. When someone disrespects you, ask yourself, is my response rooted in my values or in my wounds? Am I reacting to prove something, or am I choosing to protect something? My peace, my energy, my integrity. The highest form of respect you can offer yourself is this: to not let anyone's chaos pull you out of your calm. To stand, not with aggression, but with presence. To speak, not to dominate, but to reveal truth. And to know always that the way others treat you is not the measure of your worth. Your ability to remain grounded in your worth. That is the measure of your strength. This is the path not only to handling those who do not respect you. It is the path to mastering your life. It is the beginning of freedom, and the doorway to power that does not need to control. It simply is. When the storms of life arrive in the form of people who disregard your boundaries, dismiss your value, or test your emotional limits, the tendency is often to retreat inward or retaliate outward. Both are reactions born of imbalance. One avoids, the other attacks. But there is a third way, one far more powerful and liberating. A way that requires both courage and clarity to communicate boundaries firmly and consistently, not from anger, but from self-awareness. There is no self-mastery without boundary setting, and there is no true boundary without discipline. Boundaries are not walls, they are not punishments or barriers. They are the sacred lines we draw to protect the integrity of our energy, our peace, and our purpose. When someone disrespects you, often it is because they have never been taught how to treat you. And if you do not teach them, they will continue, not always maliciously, but often by default. The path of least resistance in human behavior is habit. So if your habit has been to tolerate disrespect in silence, do not be surprised when others step over you without noticing. I once taught a man who struggled deeply in his relationships. His colleagues spoke over him in meetings. His partner rarely considered his input in decisions. His friends made jokes at his expense. "I don't want to create conflict," he said. "I just let it slide." But what he didn't realize was that every time he let it slide, he trained the world to believe that his discomfort was less important than others' convenience. "You are not avoiding conflict," I told him. "You are postponing it. And when it comes, it will be louder and harder. To set a boundary is not to start a war. It is to define your territory. And this territory begins with your self-concept. What do you believe you are worthy of? What are you willing to walk away from? What do you allow, not because you support it, but because you fear the alternative?" He began small. The next time someone interrupted him in a meeting, he paused and calmly said, "I'd like to finish my thought." His voice did not shake. His eyes stayed soft but focused. It was not confrontation, it was declaration. And something shifted. People began to listen. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. He had trained them differently, not through shouting, but through steady presence. Real boundaries are not reactive, they are proactive. You decide who you are and what you accept long before someone tests it. And when they do, your response is not laced with emotion, it is grounded in certainty. There is a discipline in this. It requires that you know yourself well enough to not be lured by approval or repelled by disapproval. There is an ancient proverb that says, "When the roots are deep, there is no reason to fear the wind." Your boundaries are those roots. They stabilize you. They prevent you from being swayed by every passing opinion or manipulated by every emotional outburst. But let us not pretend this path is easy. It is one thing to set a boundary. It is another to maintain it, especially when it's tested repeatedly by people close to you. A woman once came to me in tears, describing how her sister constantly borrowed money and never repaid it. "I don't want to seem heartless," she said. "She's family." But I asked her, is it heartless to expect respect? Or is it self-harming to enable disrespect under the guise of love? Love without boundaries is not love, it is sacrifice. And when you constantly sacrifice your peace for the comfort of others, resentment grows in silence. That resentment poisons connection. And what began as kindness becomes corrosion. We practiced together how she could speak with her sister. She wrote it down first, then said it aloud. "I love you," she rehearsed. "But I'm no longer in a position to lend money. I want a relationship with you that isn't based on that." She wasn't cold, she wasn't cruel, she was clear. And clarity is love. Real love is never afraid of truth. What happened? Her sister was angry at first, accused her of being selfish. But over time, the relationship shifted. The dynamic equalized. And the woman, for the first time in years, felt peace in her interactions with her family. Why? Because she no longer paid for connection with her dignity. Boundaries are not about changing others. They are about changing what you allow. When you begin to set them consistently, people will test you. They will call you cold, distant, unreasonable. But understand this: the more you prioritize your peace, the more you expose the imbalance in people who benefited from your lack of it. This is why consistency is key. A boundary set once is a moment. A boundary upheld over time becomes a message. And eventually, that message becomes your standard. Others learn to approach you with respect not because you demanded it loudly, but because you lived it quietly. When you communicate boundaries, do not over-explain, do not defend, do not ask for permission. Speak with kindness and firmness. Use the word, I, more than you. Not, you always take advantage of me, but I've decided to no longer participate in this dynamic. Not, you never listen, but I'm choosing to speak with those who value dialogue. This is not manipulation, this is ownership. And perhaps most importantly, be prepared for what comes after. Some will walk away, let them. The ones who remain and respect your boundaries are the ones worth keeping. And more importantly, you will begin to feel the return of your own energy. What you gave to others in fragments, you now reclaim in full. A final story. There was a monk who meditated every morning by a large rock near the river. One day, a man passed by and began shouting insults at him. The monk sat still. The next day, the man returned and shouted again. This continued for days. Eventually, the monk looked up and said, "Why do you keep coming here if you dislike me so much?" The man was startled. "Because I want to see if you'll break." The monk replied, "You misunderstand. I don't sit here to enjoy you. I sit here to remember that peace is mine to protect, and I will not abandon it to prove anything." This is the essence of boundary setting, not to punish others, but to protect your peace, to not abandon yourself in the name of belonging, to remain rooted in who you are, even as others try to pull you from the soil of your self-respect. And yet, in this journey, you will reach a point where words and boundaries are no longer enough. There will be people who continue to cross the line, who ignore, deny, or dismiss your efforts to relate with respect. And that is when the deeper lesson must be embraced, learning to detach from people who drain your energy. This is not rejection, it is redirection. We live in a world where loyalty is praised, even when it becomes self-destructive. We are told to never give up on people, to always keep trying, to hold on no matter the cost. But what is the cost? When the same person keeps disrespecting you, ignoring your growth, mocking your efforts, what is the price of staying? To detach is not to stop caring. It is to care from a distance. It is to say, I can still love you, but I love myself too much to stay in this dynamic. I release you, not from my heart, but from my immediate space. You no longer have unrestricted access to my attention, my energy, my peace. A young man once approached me after a lecture. He spoke about his father, who constantly criticized him, dismissed his accomplishments, and undermined his confidence. "I keep trying," he said. "I thought if I just succeeded enough, he'd respect me." I looked him in the eye and said, "Respect is not a reward you win from the unwilling. It is the soil in which healthy relationships grow. If it's not there, no amount of striving will plant it." He wept, not because he was weak, but because for the first time, he realized the battle he had been fighting was not with his father, but with his own fear of letting go. We worked together. He wrote a letter to his father, not out of anger, but out of clarity. He expressed his pain. He shared his boundaries. And then he chose distance, not to punish, but to heal. The transformation was profound. He began to invest his energy elsewhere, into friendships that uplifted him, work that inspired him, practices that grounded him. And slowly, the voice of his father became quieter, not because it disappeared, but because he stopped feeding it with his attention. This is the truth of energy. Where attention goes, life flows. And where life flows, power grows. When you continuously give your energy to those who disrespect you, you drain yourself. But when you reclaim that energy and redirect it towards self-nourishment, your whole life begins to change. There is a beautiful analogy from nature. Consider the lotus flower. It grows in muddy waters, but it does not attach to the mud. Its petals repel the filth. It rises above, not by fighting the mud, but by transcending it. The lotus is not angry at the mud. It simply refuses to live within it. In the same way, you do not need to hate those who do not respect you. You simply need to stop living at the level of their energy. You rise, not in ego, but in essence. You grow, not in separation, but in sovereignty. Detachment is an act of love. Love for yourself, love for truth, love for what is real. When someone repeatedly shows you that they cannot meet you with respect, the most respectful thing you can do, for both of you, is to release them. In doing so, you create space for what is aligned to enter. And yes, There will be grief. There will be moments of doubt. There will be a part of you that asks, was I too harsh? But sit with that question. Then ask another. What part of me believed that disrespect was acceptable for the sake of connection? That is the part that now requires your love, your healing, your attention. You are not here to convince anyone of your value. You are here to embody it, not with noise, not with force, but with quiet, unshakable presence. And when that presence is consistently dishonored, you walk away, not because you are cold, but because you are awake. To detach is to trust. Trust that what is meant for you will meet you in alignment. Trust that you no longer need to carry the weight of others' projections. Trust that your energy is sacred and must be protected, not by avoidance, but by intentionality. Every person you release creates room for something deeper. Every goodbye said with clarity becomes a door to a new chapter. And every act of detachment, when done with wisdom, becomes an act of liberation. Not just from others, but from the version of you that tolerated what you no longer accept. This is not theory. It is lived experience. It is the path of self-mastery. And it begins, always, with the question, what am I allowing that is costing me my peace? From that question comes awareness. From awareness comes choice. And from choice comes change. There is a silence within you that the noise of the world can never reach. But the question is, do you know how to access it? Because when you are in the presence of people who do not respect you, when their words pierce or their actions bruise your sense of self, your greatest strength is not to mirror their energy. Your strength lies in your stillness, your ability to remain grounded, unshaken, unmoved. Not by suppressing your emotions, but by knowing how to govern them. The person who knows how to sit with themselves in stillness is not easy to manipulate. They are not quick to react. They do not seek external approval to validate internal peace. They are connected to something deeper than the surface level provocations of others. And this is where true power is born, not in domination over others, but in the quiet mastery of your own being. A woman once came to the temple, weary and restless. She had just come out of a long relationship where she was constantly disrespected. Her voice had been silenced. Her worth was questioned. Her kindness mistaken for weakness. I gave everything, she said, and I lost myself in the process. We sat together, in silence, for a long while. She grew uncomfortable. Shouldn't we talk? She asked. I smiled. Talking is easy, I said. Listening to the self is harder. She looked puzzled. But what should I do now? Again, I said nothing. I simply invited her to breathe with awareness, to feel her own body, her heartbeat, the tension she carried in her shoulders. After several days of this practice, something shifted. She began to cry, not from sadness, but from recognition. I never realized how loud the noise was inside me, she said. I was so used to trying to be heard by others that I stopped listening to myself. And that is the sickness of our time. We seek validation. We chase acknowledgement. We want others to respect us, even when we have forgotten how to hold ourselves in reverence. When your internal world is chaotic, the external world becomes unbearable. But when you cultivate stillness within, disrespect loses its grip on you. It may still hurt, but it no longer defines you. Stillness is not passivity. It is not weakness. It is the ability to observe your emotions without becoming consumed by them. It is what allows you to respond instead of react. And this, in human relationships, is a superpower, especially when you are faced with people who try to provoke you, dismiss you, or minimize your worth. There is a powerful story about a samurai who visited a Zen master. The samurai was praised throughout the land for his skill in battle, but he was easily angered, especially when disrespected. He said to the master, "Teach me how to remain calm even when I am insulted." The master poured him a cup of tea and kept pouring. The tea spilled over. "What are you doing?" the samurai yelled. The master replied, "This is your mind when it is full of ego and pride. It overflows at the slightest disturbance." The samurai looked at the puddle and understood. It was not the insult that had power. It was his inability to hold it without overflowing. This is why we train the mind through stillness. This is why we discipline the emotions. Not to suppress them, but to refine them. Anger, sadness, fear, they are not enemies. They are signals. But when you live without self-discipline, you become a puppet pulled by every emotional string others choose to tug. Stillness creates space between stimulus and response. And in that space, there is freedom, a freedom that says, you may disrespect me, but I will not disrespect myself in how I respond. You may even walk away, but not in bitterness, in clarity. You do not run. You choose, you do not flee, you let go. Self-discipline is not about rigid control. It is about aligned action. It is waking up early to sit in silence, not to impress anyone, but to meet yourself before the world meets you. It is choosing to walk away from gossip, from drama, from conflict, not out of fear, but because your energy is too precious to be wasted in meaningless exchanges. A young man once asked, how do I protect my energy from those who drain it? I told him, by being careful who you give your time, attention, and emotional response to, and by making sure that before anyone else interacts with your energy, you have first fed it with solitude, silence, and purpose. He nodded, but I could see he did not fully understand. So I gave him an assignment for the next 30 days. Spend the first hour of the morning alone, without a phone, without distraction, just in silence, breath, and reflection. He came back later transformed. I never knew how much I lived in reaction mode. He said, no, even when someone insults me, it doesn't hit the same way. I've already filled myself up that morning. Their words can't enter where I've already placed peace. This is what we must all learn. To fill ourselves before the world empties us, to return to the inner temple daily, not as an escape from life, but as preparation for it. People will not stop being disrespectful simply because you become spiritual, but your response to them will no longer be based on their behavior. It will be based on your training. And this training is rooted in practice. Just as the body must be strengthened with movement, the spirit is strengthened through stillness, not once, but daily. It is a discipline. To sit, to breathe, to watch the mind, to allow emotions to rise and fall without attachment. In doing so, you become less reactive, more reflective. A teacher once told me, the most dangerous person is not the one who yells the loudest. It is the one who has learned to remain silent when provoked, because their silence is not surrender. It is awareness. It is calculation. It is mastery. There are people who will try to disturb your peace, not because of you, but because they are disturbed within themselves. Their disrespect is a projection, not a truth. When you know this, you no longer carry the burden of their perception. You carry only what is yours. And what is yours is sacred. When the mind is undisciplined, it clings to every insult. It replays the disrespect like a broken record. It builds stories. Why did they say that? What did they mean? Do they think I'm weak? But these stories are prisons. And the key is stillness. Stillness allows you to see the event without the drama, to extract the lesson without the pain, to recognize what belongs to them and what belongs to you, and to choose your next action from a place of clarity, not wounded pride. Imagine a river. When it is calm, you can see all the way to the bottom, but when the waters are stirred, everything becomes murky. The same is true of the mind. In stillness, you see clearly. In agitation, you grasp blindly. And most conflicts arise not because of what was said, but because of how we interpreted it through our own emotional murkiness. There was a woman in her 60s who had spent decades feeling unappreciated by her husband. Every slight word, every forgotten errand, every impatient sigh, she took as evidence of his disrespect. One day she came to the temple and said, I'm tired of being invisible. I listened. Then I asked her, have you made yourself visible to yourself? Or have you only tried to be seen through his eyes? She was silent. So we practiced. Daily silence, gratitude journaling, mirror work, where she looked into her own eyes and affirmed her worth. At first it felt unnatural, but slowly she began to change. She started walking with more intention, speaking more slowly, holding her gaze. Her husband noticed. You seem different, he said. Are you seeing someone? She smiled. Yes, she said. I'm seeing myself. That's the essence of this work. You do not train your energy to prove something to others. You train it to reclaim yourself. And in doing so, the world cannot help but respond differently. Stillness, when cultivated with self-discipline, creates a magnetic field around you. People may not know why they respect you more, but they do. They sense the absence of desperation, the presence of purpose. They feel that you cannot be easily shaken, that you carry something they cannot manipulate, inner alignment. And that alignment is built, not bought. It is earned through practice, through the daily choice to pause before reacting, to breathe before speaking, to reflect before engaging, to preserve your peace, not because others deserve it, but because you do. A final story: a young girl, no more than 10, sat in a crowded room filled with shouting adults. Her parents were arguing, guests were gossiping, the television blared in the background. But she sat quietly, cross-legged, eyes closed, unmoved. Someone asked her, "How can you sit so still in all this noise?" She smiled gently and said, "The quiet place inside me is louder." This is what we must all return to, the quiet place inside. The place where the noise of disrespect cannot penetrate, where you remember who you are, where you no longer seek to control the external world, but to master your internal response to it. And from this stillness, this self-discipline, you rise, not in reaction, but in power, not to prove anything, but to preserve everything that matters: your energy, your clarity, your peace. And in that space, even the most disrespectful voices fade into background noise, because you are no longer tuned to that frequency. You are aligned with something higher, something unshakable, something true. There is a quiet suffering that many people carry with them like invisible luggage, heavy, but familiar. It is the craving to be seen, to be affirmed, to be told that we are enough. Often, this craving masquerades as ambition, as compassion, as kindness. But underneath, it is simply the desire to feel significant in the eyes of others. And when people do not respect us, when their words or silence feel like dismissal, this desire becomes a wound. A painful echo in the soul that whispers, "Why am I not enough for them to see me fully?" To handle people who don't respect you, you must come face to face with this subtle dependence. The idea that your worth depends on someone else's acknowledgement, that their lack of respect diminishes your value. It doesn't. But to realize this truth, not just intellectually but experientially, requires inner detachment. It requires the ability to let go, not of people, but of the invisible strings that tie your self-worth to their recognition. When your self-image is constructed from external validation, you become vulnerable to the moods, opinions, and projections of others. One compliment lifts you. One criticism destroys you. One look of admiration energizes you. One look of dismissal deflates you. In this state, you become a mirror reflecting others' judgments, rather than a flame lit from within. The problem is not that others don't respect you. The deeper problem is that you have outsourced your inner authority. There is an ancient teaching from the Taoist tradition that says, "Care about people's approval, and you will be their prisoner." This is not a suggestion to become cold or indifferent. Rather, it is a call to become free. Free from the compulsion to gain approval, in order to feel whole. Free from bending your truth just to be liked. Free from remaining in environments that diminish you, just to be accepted. A woman once shared her story in one of our retreats. She had spent years trying to please her family. She married who they approved of, chose a career that impressed them. She sacrificed her dreams quietly because she feared being seen as rebellious or selfish. But inside, she was dying. Her health began to deteriorate. Her energy faded. And one day she said, "I realized that I had built my entire life like a beautiful house on someone else's land." This is what happens when we are not rooted in self-validation. We may look successful. We may even appear confident. But deep within, there is a dependence that quietly controls us. The desire to be liked, to be applauded, to be seen as worthy in someone else's eyes. The problem arises when those very people choose not to respect you. When their gaze turns cold, their voice indifferent, their presence dismissive. What happens to your foundation then? Letting go of the need for external validation does not mean becoming disconnected from others. On the contrary, it creates deeper connection. Because you no longer show up with an invisible agenda. You no longer wear a mask or perform a version of yourself that you think will win affection. You become real. And realness is rare. Realness is magnetic. It does not chase. It attracts. It does not beg. It invites. There is a powerful practice I often teach. Looking into the mirror and asking yourself one question each morning. If no one applauded me today, if no one praised me, if no one approved of my path, would I still live it with honor? This practice reveals whether you are walking your truth or walking on eggshells. It is not easy at first. The ego will resist. It thrives on attention, validation, praise. But the soul seeks something deeper: integrity, inner alignment, peace. Letting go of external validation also transforms how you interpret disrespect. If someone no longer acknowledges your effort, it no longer devastates you. If they treat you with disregard, it does not shake the core of who you are. Because your worth is not hanging on the thread of their approval. You've taken back that power. You've placed it firmly in your own hands. And from there, something radical happens. You start living with freedom. I once knew a man, a martial artist, who shared with me how his own sense of self was tested. He had won numerous awards, was respected by his peers, until one day a new student, arrogant and loud, publicly questioned his technique. The room grew quiet. All eyes turned to the master. But instead of defending himself, the master smiled gently and said, "When you have walked the mountain path, you do not explain the steps to one who has never left the village." His calmness unsettled the young man more than any counter-argument could have. Later I asked him, "Why didn't you correct him?" He said, "When you need to prove yourself, you are still under the illusion that your truth depends on others seeing it." This is the essence of inner mastery. To live without needing to be seen, to act with integrity even when no one is watching, to walk your path without broadcasting every step. When you truly validate yourself, disrespect becomes just noise, not a personal attack, but a reflection of someone else's state of being. And you meet it not with retaliation, but with clarity, not with pain, but with peace. Consider the woman who speaks softly, but with conviction, who enters a room not seeking attention, but carrying presence, who does not flaunt her worth, but who walks in it. People sense her strength, not because she demands respect, but because she doesn't need it to feel whole. That is the kind of woman who can disarm disrespect with her very being. Her energy is not reactive, it is centered. And from that centeredness, she sees through people, not just at them. This ability to see through people is one of the gifts that arises when you no longer seek their approval. You begin to notice what drives their behavior, their insecurity, their fear, their own unhealed wounds. Disrespect no longer feels personal, it feels transparent. You recognize that they speak from their own limitations, not your inadequacies. And this recognition births compassion, not resentment. There was an older woman, in her 70s, who shared that for most of her life, she tried to please her critical mother. She became the perfect daughter, the overachiever, the caregiver. But no matter what she did, her mother found faults. "You should have done it this way," she would say. Or, "You always think of yourself first." It broke her heart again and again, until one day, in a quiet moment of reflection, the woman realized, "My mother speaks from her pain, not from truth, and I've been using her as a mirror to measure myself," when all along, the mirror was cracked. From that moment, she stopped seeking her mother's approval, not with bitterness, but with liberation. She cared, but she no longer needed. To let go of external validation is to take back authorship of your identity. You stop being written by others. You write yourself. Your values become your compass. Your voice becomes your guide. Your silence becomes your power. And your presence becomes enough. No performance required. But how do we develop this inner grounding in a world that constantly trains us to seek approval? Where likes and comments, reactions and ratings dominate our sense of worth, the answer is simple but not easy. You return inward. Again and again, you practice solitude, not loneliness. You spend time doing things that align with your spirit, even if no one else sees or praises them. You journal, you reflect, you walk in nature, you meditate. You train your attention to remain within yourself, rather than chasing the eyes of others. You also pay attention to the subtle language you use with yourself. Do you constantly compare your progress to others? Do you dismiss your own efforts unless someone else applauds them? Do you feel incomplete without a partner, a title, a status? These are all signs that your validation system is externally powered. And like any machine dependent on external fuel, it will eventually break down. But when you validate yourself, you become self-powered. Independent of the weather outside, you maintain your inner climate. And from this inner wholeness, you begin to attract different kinds of relationships. Ones built on mutual respect, not dependency. Ones rooted in authenticity, not performance. A woman once told me that she walked away from a relationship not because she stopped loving the man, but because she finally loved herself more. For years, she tolerated his disrespect, excusing it as stress, personality, or misunderstanding. But one morning, while standing in front of the mirror, she heard herself whisper, "I deserve to be spoken to with kindness." That single sentence changed everything. She didn't shout. She didn't argue. She simply walked away with quiet strength, and for the first time, she saw herself not through his eyes, but through her own. That is the transformation we are speaking of. A shift from, "Do they see me?" to, "Do I see myself?" From, "Will they value me?" to, "Have I valued myself today?" And from, "I hope they respect me," to, "I will never again betray myself just to be tolerated." This path requires courage. Not loud courage, but quiet, daily courage. The courage to stay in your center when people try to pull you out of it. The courage to listen to your own inner voice, even when others are louder. The courage to walk alone, if necessary, until you meet those who walk with respect. And you will know when you are free, because disrespect will no longer feel like a reflection of your worth. It will simply be information, a sign of who that person is, and a decision for you to make, not from a place of pain, but from a place of power. In the end, your validation must come from the depth of your being, from the part of you that does not shift with opinions or seasons, from the knowing that you are enough, not because of what you do or who affirms you, but because you are aligned with your truth. And from that truth, you can navigate the world with grace, presence, and unshakable dignity. In this life, you will encounter people who do not see you clearly. They may misjudge you, dismiss you, or treat you in ways that fail to reflect your value. But their blindness is not your burden. Your task is not to convince others of your worth. It is to walk in it quietly, consistently, and without apology. Respect, in its truest form, begins with how you treat yourself. When you are rooted in self-awareness, when you uphold your own standards, when you respond with discipline instead of reactivity, you are no longer dependent on the behavior of others to dictate your peace. The disrespect of others does not break you when you have mastered the art of staying centered. When you observe instead of absorb. When you assert instead of attack. When you walk away not to punish, but to protect what is sacred within you. Let others be as they are. Let their words reveal their level of consciousness. Let their actions speak louder than their apologies. You are not here to chase validation, or to remain in places where your soul must shrink to be accepted. You are here to grow in clarity, in integrity, and in strength. And when you respond to disrespect not with anger, but with wisdom, you begin to transform not just the dynamic, but yourself. So walk calmly, but firmly, speak softly, but truthfully, and carry yourself in such a way that even in silence, your presence commands respect, not by force, but by the quiet power of one who knows who they are. This is how you handle people who don't respect you. You return to yourself, and from that place, no one, not even the loudest critic, can move you from your path.